Yeah.
David's from CBNL, Cambridge Broadband Networks Ltd. He's travelled down from Cambridge today, or last night, and David was introduced to me as a bit of a guru when it comes to CI, continuous integration, to the extent that he was able to actually provide me a list of presentations to choose from. So I have selected the one around CI and CD, so continuous integration and continuous deployment. So what I'll do is, all okay on that?
Yeah.
I'll hand over to David to provide more introduction.
Okay, so thank you, David, for your presentation. Actually, there are some things that you introduced that saved me some time and also helps me to talk more about some other stuff. So hopefully that we can also save some questions, but it's all right. We can have as many questions as we have. So let me introduce myself first. So I worked for Oracle and United Nations. For Oracle, I give classes about Java. So I know Java for 25 years now. Yeah, hopefully I don't look that old, but it's a lot. Now, as John said, I'm working for CBNL. We are doing point-to-multipoint microwave communication. So think about a huge Wi-Fi that gets to 10 miles, far 10 miles or 20 kilometers. Yeah, there's a lot to say about CBNL, but I don't want to spend that much time on that one. We can talk about that later. I'm the maintainer of the Italian documentation for Git. I'm from Italy. I speak Italian, so I'm maintaining documentation in Italian for Git. As volunteering roles, I'm working for, I'm volunteering for St. John Ambulance. I'm unit manager in Cambridge and also first aider. Hopefully nobody is having any issue today, but if you have an issue, I can help you. I hope not to do that. I live in Cambridge, and for the Cambridge, in collaboration with Cambridge Council, I'm producing a podcast to help teenagers and unemployed people to get a new life or set their life. If you want to get in touch with me on Twitter, you can find on Git or Daftano or on GitHub as well. So I save this photo for later because usually this is, I love to cook, to bake. I usually bake pizza, bread. So this is one image of myself. It's more private. It's not usually anywhere. But I felt that this is a more private environment, so I can share that one. So I'm really attached to that photo. So I have a question for you before starting. So when was last time that you did a major deployment from this place? I suppose nobody did that. So let's suppose that, let's imagine that we are going to this place on holiday the day before there is a major deployment for your company. So let's imagine that one. How the deployment, how you expect that the deployment will go? Is something like that? Yeah, probably everybody is that. During this presentation, I'll show you how not to end on this situation. Hopefully, then it also depends on yourself, but I will give you the tools to be happy in an environment where you don't have to worry about the next presentation. That's why in CBNL I'm running the automation clinic. So what I usually say is, whatever you're doing 2 or 3 times manually, that should be automated too. So let's talk to me. I'm working with Mahima, and we are trying to automate everything that we can automate. Why? I'm not looking to work too much, but I really like to have things working on themselves. And so to go on holiday, I always say, my job should be to go on holiday 6 months, having everything running without me and still getting paid. That may be trivial, but I'm working on that one. Why I want to do that? I think because it's cool. Well, some people think that it's cool. Yes, it's cool to have everything working smoothly. Some people usually argue, yes, it's better to have everything automated. But when you say it's better, it's very opinionable. Because why? People usually ask you to get some proof of your statement. It's when I moved from, when I was working for UN, I suggest to move from Subversion to Git. The first things that when they ask me why, I say, yeah, because it's better. I knew why it was better, but that was the first things. Then I explained why it's better. It's not easy, it's doable, but it requires a lot of work from our side. I could also see that it's doing that, it's groovy, and we will see how. Many people talk about CI, continuous integration. David talked about CI. We know that there are some tools on the market. So one of them is Jenkins, there is Travis, and then there is TeamCity. At the end, they do the same thing in a different way with different flavors. So there are companies that choose one or the other, and I cannot say which one is better. Jenkins and Trevor are, well, Jenkins is free, Trevor is kind of free, it can be cheap. If you're running an open source project on GitHub, public project, it's free. If it's personal or private one, it's not. TeamCity, it's kind of free as well, it's more commercial, so usually if you run for a company, you need a license. Now I'm just talking about Jenkins. So this is a pipeline of Jenkins. This comes from the documentation of Jenkins. But why I'm talking about this one is because Jenkins you might have seen running in different flavor, not in this way. This is a pipeline, so it's often called, it's Blue Ocean, so it's another version of Jenkins. It's like the new Jenkins. So you can have your build process in steps, like a pipeline. You define the pipeline. So there are three ways to define your pipeline. One is that answers your question. I don't know your name. Adam. So when Adam asked how you do that, actually you can do in three ways. One way is the developers write their own pipeline into their repository code. So they do whatever they want, the way they want, so they know. There is no need for a DevOps or a manager to work on this stuff. Mostly, the project, we have a common part of some checks or some instructions, some functions. So you don't want to duplicate them. I always say I don't want duplication. So in our in our checks, we verify that there is no duplication. That's the same. So you can have a common library shared between all the projects that runs in Jenkins. Plus, you can have other scripts that actually run as a script written in Groovy, which is Java dialect. So Adam, for you, you can just go, if you use Jenkins, there is a script builder. So you say, okay, I want to do these things. There is a Dropbox, a drop down, you choose, make some choices, and then it builds the script for you. And then you have to apply on copy and paste to your script. So that can help you to start. Building a huge script is not easy. If you have a huge project, you have to look after a lot of stuff, so it makes it complicated. It's actually an application into your continuous integration. Is for everybody clear what CI, continuous integration, doing? Do you have any question about that? That's because I'm now moving on a more dangerous area, which is where I want to focus more. So how you can say that your build is working? Is anybody here that can say, okay, yeah, everything is working and I can deploy right now to production? Yeah. That's not easy. We are going with CBNL, I'm going to a point where we can do that. I want to do that. So one of the ways to be sure that everything is working when you deploy is having tests. But how many tests you have? I can mention unit tests, integration tests, then if for other project, mainly based on Java, I use Groovy and Spock framework, which do a lot of tests. If you use Java, you know probably JUnit, but we also use PyTest. You know, you have a lot of choices of tests. If you are developing a web application, I would suggest you to use Selenium. We are using Selenium because just simulate what your user is doing. So that means that while you're running your tests, your build, you are doing the tests that usually you do manually. I don't want things to do that manually because it's waste of time, because people forget what they have to do. Yes, you can have a manual with all the steps to run, but have you ever read twice or 3 times or 20 times the same manual to do the same steps? After a time, you just assume that you remember all the steps. Even a QA tester will forget something. All takes a lot of time. And you know what is, that is something that may laugh my boss, but I still think that it's good and we are going that way. We have tests for tests. We actually have a framework that we call Autotest that is testing our hardware, because we produce hardware and software. It's checking hardware and it's doing that continuously. Continuously means continuously. When we finish a set of tests that usually lasts 8 hours, another test automatically starts for other 8 hours. And that's 24 hours, 7 days per week. But is that test fine? Because actually that's not really a test, that's an application. So we are now testing the test as well. And we found some errors that, or some weird changes to the code that you assume that are correct, but when you just assume. I don't want those assumptions. I want to be sure that everything is working. When I talk about CD, many people just think to that. Actually, today we are not talking about this one. My CD is continuous deployment. Why this is attached to CI? Because actually what we are doing is after building, running the tests, we are deploying to production. Did I say production? Yes. I'm not scared about moving production. With CBNL, actually, we are not actually doing that because our production is hardware that we ship to customers. So it's slightly different. We cannot just go to customers and say, look, I'm swapping your hardware. You know, when hardware is, it's a bit different. Our hardware usually is in very far places. We may have some hardware next to lions, so it's not something that you want to swap that easy. Usually common examples are about Google and Facebook, but today I'm not talking much about them. I will give you some example of what they are doing, but not that many. So I have further question for you. How many of you is doing only one deployment per year? I'm very glad that nobody. How many 4? Okay, it's 1. How many 12? It's 1 a month. Okay, 6. How many 26? That's 1 each every 2 weeks, which is common sprint. Oh. So are you between 26 and 12 or between 1 and 4? The others that didn't raise their hand.
50.
Okay, 50, okay. How many is doing 50,000 deployment per year? I saw 2 hands. Okay, that's awesome. So how do you do that? Do you do that manually? No. Okay. Okay, one of the example is Amazon that now is doing actually deployment every 11 seconds. They have a lot of projects, that's true, but that still goes every 11 seconds. And then they are going to path to have 3 or 4 deployments per second. This is only achievable with the continuous deployment culture and tools. It's not just the tools, it's also the culture, because you need people to buy your idea that there is nobody that needs to approve something, because there are tools and checks in the background that verify whatever human people can do. The only things that you may decide to choose, so it's hand one, when you are delivering a new function or a new website or a new application, so then it's strategical decision that you say, okay, I want to do that this day or the other day. But if it's a common development, a common improvement, you don't need that thing. So that means that your manager or the team can focus on delivering what they are paid for, the functionalities. Unfortunately, they also have to pay, for bug fixing. But with continuous integration and continuous deployment, we can reduce bug fixing. So in our team, we agreed to reduce the amount of time that we spend to bug fixing to less than 1%. Well, we said 1%. Actually, now we are 0.2% of time spent for bug fixing. I know I work in the automation clinic. For me, it's kind of easier to have less bugs. But then what that means that the impact of the organization of my mistake or our mistake is 0.2%, so it's very low. And we do that running more tests. I have a graph for you because most of the time the managers, they just want numbers. It's not saying it's better is not enough. They want some numbers. So I have some for you. Using continuous deployment architecture and culture, a company, I'll let you guess, and then I will tell you which company is it, managed to reduce the costs of the development by 40%, overall costs. Per program, the costs were reduced by 78%. The improvement of their product grew up by 140%. And the resources that they got available to improve, to drive their innovation, increased by 5 times, just using continuous deployment. Do you know which company is it? The company is HP. So it's not a small company. They invested a lot on continuous deployment, and then they achieved some results. So actually, they're saving a lot of times. So what is my aim, and what I would like you to get there, is to have thousands of deployment per day. That is possible. That means that every change that you make to your code base, you can get a deployment. For CBNL, we are not allowed to do that to the customer just because I told you that's server. We provide help to provider, to telcos. So it's not that easy. They want to sell their bandwidth for customers, not upgrade their application. But you can do it. In previous project, I did it, and every change goes in production smoothly. We don't really realize. We just get the latest one. We are not the only ones. Actually, a major one that is doing the same is Netflix. Anytime a developer in Netflix make a change, that goes in production when it's ready. So they test it, the framework, infrastructure, test the change, and then it goes into production. So you can see a difference on your, if you use Netflix at your place. I hope that you're not using Netflix in the office, but it's, if you do, let me know which company you're working for. And then you can get a different behavior or fixing a bug or new functionality just a second later. But how we can get that point? It's easy to say, yes, okay, you throw everything to the continuous deployment, then everything works. That's not true, unfortunately. We have different ways to achieve that. There are at least 6 ways. And I'll go through them. So the first one is recreate. Probably most of them, many of you know this behavior. So we do recreate. We have, this works with software projects mainly. We have our software in our server that is running up fine. Now we have version 2 or version 4, whatever. What you do with this stage, you just shut down the server or the servers, and then you start building your module, running up your modules until they are all up, and then all the infrastructure is working. That's fine. Not really, I don't like that one, to be honest, because then it means that for the time that it takes to shut down the server and restart the server, the customer, the business, is not running. So you are losing money. Think about your bank account. You want to do a transfer or you want to do a purchase with your credit card. Oh, sorry, they just shut down the server and you need to try tomorrow and you have to pay your bill at the restaurant. It's not something that you would like to have. Still, there are some companies that are doing that. In some cases, might be acceptable. I don't like it. The only reason to have these scenarios nowadays is that it's super easy to use it. You shut down, you turn it on, hope that everything works, and then move on. If it doesn't work, oh, that's a shame for you. Another scenario is ramped. So that one is slightly different. So we have our server, and we want to swap the new version. What we do is just starting to the new modules in another server, making them available, and then as they become available, we move on from the older one. So we know that there is not that much disruption on the services. For that one, we need a tool that is now the wheel, is shown as a wheel, that will manage the traffic to one side or the other. This tool is, I'll call it now load balancer. So I assume that everybody is used to that one. So we have a tool that is doing our job for us. So there is not that much work for us. It's still some automation. The good thing of this one is that when we know that a module is working, we can swap from the two environment. But we are still working module by module. There might be some times where you're changing the API, so the new version doesn't work with the previous one. So you either have everything or not. But this one is not always usable. Another famous one is the blue-green deployment. How that works? We have our server, which is in production, that is already working, everything is working, and we hopefully have other servers where we are running our tests. For this deployment strategy, two servers must be the same as hardware. As software, they will be different. So we have our production, and the green one will be our test environment. We test in our environment. We do all our QA tests either manually or with our tools that run continuously, deployment and changes. And when we are happy of what we have in our green environment, we just swap from the blue to the green. So the customer will just get to the green environment. What happens to the blue one? We are just starting to have the new deployment, new tests and development on the blue one. When we are ready, we do the swap again. That's controlled by the load balancer again. It's not much work that we have to do, but we have another benefit is anything goes wrong in the green environment when we were testing, we can get back in a matter of seconds, because then we only have to change in our load balancer. So it means that you can test. Well, you should go in production when everything is tested. But if sometimes there are something that just don't work, and you can't know before, or you didn't have a test to know that before, that's time to write more tests. But you can come back and say, okay, you can recover. We have few cycles of downtime. We still have an environment that is working because it's the blue one. Another strategy is the Canary. So, okay. With the Canary environment, we have the two different versions. They are running at the same time. So main traffic, majority of traffic goes to our server. Yeah, the left one for you, the left server. But we have in place the new version for the new server for the new version. What it happens that our load balancer, we shift the traffic from left to right server, and we can slowly deploy, make available our application to more customers. So we will get to a point where all the traffic will be sent to the new version. If something wrong happens, we can revert the traffic to the previous one and fix in the new version. So that means that if something goes wrong, the impact on the customer will be on a small set of customers. So usually you have that small set of customers, some you can call early available clients or VIP clients. So some that you have a good relation, where you say, okay, I'm going to deploy, give you access to this new function, and you tell me if something goes wrong. But that also implies that the things will go automatically. So if the customer is not, or our test department, QA department, does raise any issue, the load balancer will keep swapping the traffic bit from the previous one to the new one. Do you know what is the issue with this? I'm really keen to use this deployment in many situations, but here there is an issue that if we want to roll back our changes, it's not that easy, not that fast. Because yes, we can swap back the load balancer, but suppose that you are not just playing on the web, but you have a database. The data that went to the other server, you cannot move that easily back. Sometimes you cannot move at all, because if the database is different, no way that you can do that. No way that you want to spend a lot of time. You could, but then there is a lot of effort that you have to spend to go back. Still, it's quite good. Another technique is to use the A/B testing deployment. So in that thing, we have a second test of functionality, so a second version of our application. We need a load balancer again, and traffic we go from one version to one version or the other. But how many of you use any type of social media? Few people. Okay, that's surprising. So what happens in these cases? That the application can have different, they will start with the same data, the same, the different software. All the user will go on one side. So in this case, it's a butterfly. My daughter chose the butterfly in the color. So and so they all get to the same version. But then if we have VIP users, or if we have select set of test or users that we want to test our new application, we will use another rule for our test. So the butterfly users will always go to the left side of our application, and the bees users will only go to the right one. So then we can understand and study what they are doing, how they are interacting with our application, and then we can improve our application and move slowly the users from one version to the other one. We may also decide to keep user into different layers. So for example, we can have, if you are working on a free application, fee-free application, then you can start having a paying one, but then you can have these two running all together and just moving the user from one to the other. So if you are using, for example, GitHub for your project, then you might have, usually you have free public repositories, but you can have private ones. The private one is not a completely different application. It's just enabling more modules to get you more functionalities. Another benefit of this strategy is that we can have the application can be different by language. So you might not be able to have to use just internationalization, or the two applications must be different. If you think about Google, we are using this butterfly version in UK. If you are in China, you're using the B version. It's still Google, but it depends where you are. It's not just the results that it returns you. It's a different application, because the Chinese government just forced Google to use a different version. So they are using this scenario. With this one, you have a full control of who gets where. So compared with the Canary, where you don't know which user, you might not know which user using which version, you have to track that one. With this scenario, you absolutely know what is going on. And another deployment that is fancy is the shadow one. So that means that we have our environment, the standard one, that is running, all the users are running on that environment, and then we run a shadow environment where we have the same, well, not the same. We have a new version of the application. So we build module by module. And what we actually do, our load balancer is sending the traffic to both applications, to both versions. Why we want to do that? That's because customer will work on the left side and on the A side, and we will test the B side with everything. So our database will be updated with the same data. So then we can test that everything is working, but not with fake data. Those are real data. Things may break. If they break, who cares? We have our A side that is still working. We have data that are good data, they are updated data, and we can throw away, we can trash the B side without any issue. And then we can rebuild it, we can test it. When we know that everything is as we want, we can just swap them. But that saves the downtime, so it's different from the blue-green scenario, because then the customer will never realize that they were working on two platforms or there is any rollback. They're just going forward. Do you guess how much time it takes to run these two, whatever scenario you decide, because there are those 6 examples that can work. Each one can work for you. Well, apart from the recreate one, which might not be all the time possible. But for these scenarios, do you know how much effort is for you to decide to roll back or to analyze the benefits or the quality of your product? Can you guess? I cannot. It's very hard because we have to spend time analyzing what is the output of the other, the B side. Do you want to do, if you want to do that manually, that's very costing. I don't want to do it manually, so I want a tool that can do that for me. So I just set a scenario, and then it will run whatever rules we define for me, and will report back to me. If something goes wrong, I want that tool to have the rollback or change in strategy and deployment done for me. I want to be on holiday and don't worry. I don't want my boss calling me, oh, nothing is working. I just want the waiter to call me, maybe to pay the bill. We still have to pay bills, but that's what I want to do. So how we can do that? What is the tool? To be honest, there are many tools that can give you that dream. I test many of them, not all, but I test many of them. Then I got to a point where I found my good kind of couple. And the first one is Docker. I found it 5 years ago, roughly, and I really loved it. And then my load balancer nowadays is Kubernetes. What, do you know what Docker and Kubernetes are? Okay, so some yes, some no. So I will go quickly through them. So have you used virtual machine? Or you know, well, we get the virtual machine. So Docker is roughly like a virtual machine. The difference is that it's not completely separate. So if you're running Linux, you cannot run Windows in a Docker machine. You are sharing the kernel with Docker, the kernel of your running machine. But you have a big isolation. Processes didn't get in isolation because you're using the kernel, so that's by default, by definition. But with Docker, you can have a different environment with different variables, different packets, with different versions. And it runs like a virtual machine, but use less resources. It's faster to spin up, to destroy, and to recreate. But still, I don't want to do things manually. So I want something that will turn on our machines, given some rules, and then do some checks and report me back if those checks works. For those, I'm using Kubernetes, which is an orchestration. the only thing that, well, Kubernetes does a lot of things, but to summarize them, it selects a hardware or a place where you want to deploy your Docker image that becomes a container, and take care of everything. So you can say, look, for this application, I want 100 instances on an hardware that has that much memory and that much CPU. So if you're running, for example, a database, you probably want more disk space rather than CPU. If you're running a graphic application, you want more CPU and more memory. So you just say, okay, to run this application, you need these requirements that you have set in Kubernetes in some way. I'm not going deep in this subject because it will take more time. It's just another presentation. But then Kubernetes will select the available hardware, will run your images, your containers on those hardware for the number of instances that you select. If something goes wrong, the application dies, Kubernetes just fire up another one somewhere else. We don't know where is that else. We just know the category of the hardware. Many people are scared of not knowing where the application is running. Most of the time you have your IP, you know, oh, the IP4, I know that there is this version with these features. With Kubernetes, you lost that control. Because, yes, you will point to IP4, but actually Kubernetes is running its own network. So the 4 is just the outer side of your application. Behind the 4, there might be 100 to 1,000 instances of your application. The benefit is that if one of those instances dies, you don't see that one because you only point to 4. So it's like a round-robin DNS. It's slightly more complicated, but more complex, but that's what you get. So Kubernetes will fire up another instance, and you get everything as before, as many instances that you want. So when you want to change the configuration, the version, you just, well, not you. When I'm saying you, I mean your continuous deployment environment, not you. You configure that one, but then your continuous deployment, we just change the configuration in Kubernetes and say, I want that much number of nodes, or pods, as Kubernetes called, deployed on this type of hardware. They can run together, and then you can swap, you can change, you can balance the how they work. But talking about load balancer, you may have run through some of them, because Kubernetes is doing some work, but it's not a real load balancer, it's an orchestrator. So which tool you would use as load balancer? I work with 3 of them. The first one that I came on was HA proxy, which works very nice. I used that in UN, and we were very happy. In a small deployment, you can use Nginx. I know that it's a web server, but it also can work as load balancer. Actually, if you're working with Docker, sometimes you will use Nginx to do some tricks, let's call it that one, because that's the way that works. And the CISO instead is a new, kind of new, a load balancer, and it's produced by Google. Google has, in this story, has another part. Kubernetes as well was built by Google. It was internally built, and then they released as open source. As I told before, using a continuous deployment is not just tools. You can get those tools set up quite quickly once you know how they work. If you have a green light, you can do that in a couple of days, and you are up and running. What I want to run now is to have a cloud of continuous integration and continuous deployment hardware in my organization. I joined the organization a year ago, and I haven't done that, but I just say that it needs 2 days. That's where the culture comes from, because when we introduced static analysis to our developers, I think that we got for a couple of months some requests. Oh, it's not working. The CI is failing. It's not compiling. Then checking the sources. Yes, because you introduced a new bug. we don't want bug. We have zero policy bug for new bugs, as you did. For legacy code, okay, we have tons, fine. Some of them actually might not be relevant, but we don't want new bugs from now. So that was an issue. People didn't buy from the first day. They want to, yeah, but the code is the same. I didn't change that part of the code. It's in the same file, but I didn't change it. Yes, that's what I want to when I ask for refactoring. I don't care if somebody else made that mistake months ago, but you're working on that function, you can improve it. Oh yeah, but then if I change that one, who knows if that will not break something else written 15 years ago? That's how old is our software. Yeah, I don't know. That's why I want you to write a test. Oh, but we already have auto-test. I can change just the common library and everything will work. Are you sure? Then I think that we took 10 days to get to a point where, well, now we are sure. But after the 10 days, we went to the previous version, the one that was said that had a bug. There is no bug. But they just changed that one, assuming that was wrong. How we can be sure that everything is still working? I don't know you, in my experience, when I started developing application, I didn't write tests at the beginning. I didn't even know about tests. Tests sometimes was, okay, yes, I was working on a user interface, Java application, the desktop application. So, okay, click here, click there. Yeah, it works, fine. That was my test. There were less tools, honestly, so it wasn't easy. Especially with the UI, it wasn't easy. With the web, now we are using Selenium, so if you're developing a web application, Selenium is running the tests for you. So it's just clicking there, expecting some results, but you don't have to do manually. It's done continuously. In our pipeline, we have a stage where we test all the application, and we add more tests all the time. Unfortunately, there are people that don't know how to write tests. That's reality. They might not know the tool or the framework. I use a couple of them, a couple of frameworks depending on the language, but still there are plenty of them. At the end, you have to decide which one you want to use. I went for Spoke and PyTest and Selenium as our test infrastructure, but it was our choice for what we have. There are many. If you are working with Java, it's JUnit. Yeah. And most of the time, people will say, oh, but if I write tests, I cannot fix that bug in this sprint. I cannot deliver that function in that sprint. It's a waste of time. It's the same waste of time for documentation, isn't it? But then when I found that when I joined the company, there were some people that just thought, oh, yeah, that was clear. Well, I'll tell you another story. I was working for another company. At some point, we got a request to change an icon. It was a web application. So, you know, how much can take to change an image? 2 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour with the coffee. So I started that one. After 2 weeks, I went to my boss and said, look, I can't change that icon. And of course, he said to me, he said, 2 weeks after you can't change an icon? It's unbelievable. It's a shame. You cannot do that. I didn't went on holiday in those 2 weeks, by the way. I was just trying. It didn't work. So he developed that part. I said, okay, you can do it. Yeah, I will do it. 2 weeks later, he managed to add to change the image. Why? Because there was no documentation, no tests, so nothing was working. Everything was manually done. In the same company, at some point, I said, okay, shall we use, it was a big monolith, and I said, shall we use Docker to do that one? They didn't know Docker. The culture was different. There were some people that, looking at the image, they were copying the image. You know, like a baby, when a newborn baby that a nurse just holds your baby with that care. They were doing the same with the packages. So there was a person that was doing that. So 2 people worked 6 months to upgrade 100 servers. When I left, 1 person upgraded 300 servers in less than half an hour. He just hit a button, and then he spent his time doing other stuff. Actually, the half an hour was just checking that it was everything run. So you can get there, but you have to fight with the organization culture. or to show them with some clear results that that's possible, achievable. And you need time, that's fine. But then you will save a lot of time later. Do you have any question?
I have one for you.
Yeah, go on.
CBNL.
Yeah.
And the culture there.
Yeah.
How easy has that been to adopt a, as you said, you're not on continuous deployment, but as near as you can get towards that with continuous deployment to the first part of production, I guess is where you get to.
Yeah.
How has that been adopted within CBNL? Is that something where you've had pushback? So I know you've got quite a large testing environment. I know there's a lot of real-time testing and physical testing. But from that point of view, how's that culture been received within the organisation?
We're doing that in different stages. The first one was very hard. Actually, we literally crashed because at some point suddenly what was working one day was not working the next day. We didn't. We were not soft on that one. So we said when we introduced the static analysis, 0 bugs. No way, there is no discussion with this one, no exception. So we just had, I think that we wasted 3 weeks of time because people were not used to this change. They didn't see the benefit. So I was at work, even if that was not my duty, I was showing tests, the benefits, okay, that's what we can get. But I had to spend a lot of my time to show the benefit of that one. At the beginning, they didn't buy in any case. After, now it's almost a year that we had that change, they see the difference. So they make the changes. I saw that the peer review now it's way better. We have a lot of tools that do the review on it automatically. But now I see people that go on GitHub and say, oh, we should improve that one. We should change that one. Why we did that one? I haven't seen those questions before. Partly maybe because they say, okay, then it won't pass the checks on CI. Or maybe Davide then will ask you and waste you 1 week to make those changes. That may be partially. But we saw some of those improvements. Well, don't tell anybody in CBNL, but we have more changes that will come later. So we want to improve that one. So as I said, we have now 1% as a goal of time spent in fixing bugs. I want to push that one on development side as well. Not 1%, I know that's not possible. Well, it's a dream. But going further, pushing to have a lower time spent in bugs. We want to deliver features. So that's where I want developers to spend time. And that's what I want the continuous deployment doing.
But you've got management buy-in on that to go and start rolling that out. Yeah. Is that, because I mean, that's the key thing for a lot of the guys here, is about, we can come up from the bottom up, this is great, this is going to bring many benefits. But sometimes if you don't have that top-down buy-in, is that something that you had to work on, or was that something that they...
Not on CBNL, but the previous company, when I went to my boss, I was a developer in that case, I was senior developer. I went to him and showed, look, the application took half an hour to start up. So I showed him, I asked him twice, can I do that on Docker? And he said no, because it was not useful. That was his opinion. I did it in any case on my spare time. Then I went to him and say, with my laptop, push the button to run Docker on my machine. And after 30 seconds, more or less, he said to me, what next? Open the browser, go on localhost, and the application was there. Then he was staying the browser and myself, because he didn't believe that in so much small time was able. Then next step was to talk with the stakeholders. So we had, that company had the headquarters in London. Every other week I was traveling to London to speak with the stakeholders, so all the management, and say, look, this is what I achieved. They had working on a new version for 3 years and they didn't manage because they were way scared about the next step. I showed that it was possible. I need the Kubernetes, I need the cloud, because actually I built a cloud for them, an internal cloud. I had a clear idea of what I want and showed them, this is what I want, where you can help me, but this is what I need. So I showed them the benefits, the costs. So when I told him, look, those 2 persons spent 6 months to improve 100 servers, and each server was 8-day work. I can do that in half a minute. I can do that in huge time. In CBNL, we are working with hardware, but we also have some software abstraction. So now we have a setup that includes 1,000 nodes. With the refactoring, I saw that we could go to 500,000 nodes using the same resources. We don't have any customer that has 500,000 nodes, so that will be that we can test our network, we stress test our software in a way that it's impossible to prove before. We cannot have. Our devices are that big. We have a lab with more than 300, but it's a room like more or less like this one, full of these devices. We cannot have 500,000, even because they are quite costly. So using this new scenario and using other technologies, we can get there. You don't do that overnight. But when I told that to my boss, he said, "Yeah, it's fine. I'm happy." So, you know, Tom. It's you can get more spending less, and it's more safe. We can run more tests.
So I mean, the key thing, I think, the message is, if you can start small and demonstrate the benefits, then you're going to get, it's easy to get a buy-in. Yeah. You can work around that.
My goal rule is to start with MVP, so minimum viable project. So you start with that one. That must be small. If you go to your boss and say, "Oh, I need 3 months to do this improvement," he will not say you can do it. But if you go there and you say, "Look, I want 2 days, 1 day a week for a month to try this one, give me a month." 1 day per week, come on. Probably you waste that one when you go to coffee or just chatting or checking your email. If you spend that one doing something, then you can prove that it's working. For CI, we have a website that is providing other information. At the moment, it's all manually done. There is no framework behind that one because the information is not changing that often. So I'm updating the website when it works. But now I'm getting feedback from other colleagues. "Oh, this is useful." So I know it's in my plan to make that automatically updated. There is a page that nobody is checking. I'm not going to work on that one. But to build that static page took me 20 minutes. That's fine. To make it dynamic the first time, probably I should have spent 1 week. I have more interesting stuff to do. So if you start this way, people will see what you are giving, what you are delivering, then you can get more. And then you will have the time to deploy, to develop what you really need. But don't go big, start smaller, the smallest you can.
Okay, well, so thank you, David.
Is that it?